At the time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a child whom he put among them and said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever becomes humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. If any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for you if a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depth of the sea." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. Okay, so by show of hands, I want to see how many people in here are anti-children. Oh, we do have a couple folks in there. Bit of a surprise, but as a general rule, I would say that most of us probably aren't anti-children, right? On one hand, my sermon title is a little laughable, right? That here we are to protect and cherish children. Of course we're here to protect and cherish. Who would not sign up for protecting and cherishing children? Who would say, besides maybe a few of us, that they're anti-children? Yet, the statistics are striking. More than 750,000 children each year are abused or neglected, one every 47 seconds. 40% of these children get no services at all after an initial investigation. And each year, approximately 800,000 children spend time in foster care. On any given night, 200,000 are homeless. 1 in every 4 of the overall homeless population. Today, 14.7 million children in America. Nearly 1 in 5 are poor. 2/3 living in working families. And the burden of poverty falls disproportionately on minority children, with nearly 2 in 5 black and 1 in 3 Latino children affected, compared to less than 1 in 10 white children. A white boy has a 1 in 17 chance, if born in 2001, of going to prison in his lifetime. A Latino boy, 1 in 6. An African American boy, 1 in 3. In the face of these numbers, we read Jesus' words from the gospel, and he says, anyone who would put a stumbling block in front of a child like this would be better off if he had a millstone tied around his neck and thrown in the ocean. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen a millstone, a massive stone used to grind corn or wheat into flour, but you don't need to see one to know you don't want to tie one around your neck when you go swimming. It's a harsh image. But in the face of such an image, what then is our call? The series title and today's sermon series are the same: Precious in God's Sight, answering our call to protect and cherish every child. It comes from the work of Marian Wright Edelman and the Children's Defense Fund. And so we share this series with those throughout the month of October in many faith communities who are sharing some of these same conversations about how to do that, how to protect and cherish children. But again, with the power of these statistics, which came from the Children's Defense Fund, by the way, what do we do about it? How do we do something? Of course, we wouldn't say that we are anti-children, but how do we become pro-child? My guess is that many of us want to help, we just don't know how. When such statistics are in our faces, we don't know how we're going to fix these systems, fix these big problem issues. And so today I give what is a much simpler list of alternatives, a simpler list of solutions. It's not going to fix everything, and it's not going to be all-inclusive, but it is something that you and I can do today, this week, now. things that we can do to feel like we are making a difference to fight some of these things. Again, this is not an all-inclusive list, nor is this a list that I would say as I shake my finger at you, you should do those things. I point the finger at myself as well. As all of us take up this call to cherish and protect our children, a few possible ways to do that. Number one, I would invite you to give financially to a program that is making a difference with the poor. Again, the words of Jesus seem relevant here. Again and again and again, Jesus speaks to the importance of caring for the poorest among us. Those who are most impacted by poverty are the most vulnerable, often children. And so if we want to protect and cherish children, we must care for the poor. And one of the ways that we can do that is to fund organizations making a difference. Now, this is not simple, but it is critical. Again, according to the Children's Defense Fund, hear these words: poor children lag behind their peers in many ways beyond income. They are less healthy, trail in emotional and intellectual development, and are less likely to graduate from high school. Poor children are also more likely to become the poor children or poor parents of the future. And every year that we keep children in poverty costs our nation $500 billion in lost productivity, poorer health, and increased costs of the criminal justice system. In other words, caring for the poor makes economic sense, moral sense, and spiritual sense. When Jesus claimed that our salvation hinged on how we took care of the least of these, perhaps he was thinking of children in poverty as he did so. But here's where it gets tough. This is where it gets difficult to open up our checkbooks or our pocketbooks and start to give. Because for many of us, when we speak of caring for the poor, there's this tug in the back of our heads, back of our minds, that we simply don't want to reward laziness or those that scam the system. Of course, there are those individuals out there, even though, again and again, it's been shown to be a small slice of those actually dealing with poverty. However, we realize, as it tugs on the backs of our minds, that we don't want to enforce systems of multi-generational poverty. But let me say this clearly. Regardless of what the parents do, no child deserves to be poor. I believe that we can have a conversation about how helping hurts. The words of a powerful book by Steve Corbett and Brian Fickert. However, when we want to teach adults a lesson at the cost of vulnerable children, we have lost our way. Punishing the poor punishes children the most. If we want to protect and cherish them, we must care for the poor. So to give to the organizations that do that is a meaningful way to help. Of course, the Children's Defense Fund is one of them, but there are many others. However, I would suggest that you do your research. Just because you get something in the mail that has a picture of cute children on it, do not open your checkbook. Some are more helpful than others in systemic ways at taking care of the problems that face our children, especially those in poverty. Number one, research and give. Number two, talk to someone who works with children. I know it seems a little bit strange, but oftentimes decisions are made for our families and our children by those who don't really talk to those that work with families or children. So I would encourage you to do just that, to talk to them, to listen to those who do work in our schools, who do work maybe as a teacher or a counselor, somebody that works regularly with Family Promise like Dana Ortiz, or maybe one of our Head Start teachers. Now, my guess is that most of you know that we have a Head Start program in our church, and my guess is that most of you have no idea what happens there. More than likely, most of us haven't taken time to sit down and talk to the teachers, or to talk to some of the staff members at the home office downtown, to listen to stories about kids that have been affected, families that have been changed and transformed in that program. Perhaps you also do not know that this building was created because you all believed that early childhood education was critical, was important to protecting and cherishing our children. So 40 years ago, we created space for one of the first early childhood education centers in town, We supported it then and continue to support it now with Head Start. And again, it's the Children's Defense Fund who reminds us that Head Start has been shown to be incredibly effective at helping more children compete and complete at higher levels of education, higher earnings, better health, more stable relationship, less likely to commit a crime or to be incarcerated. Some of you may not know even the basics of what Head Start is. It's basically a preschool program for at-risk families, giving them a leg up when life often keeps them down. And so it is an opportunity to do just that. And I would invite you to sit down and listen to some of the people that make a difference. They come into our building. You can find them pretty easily. But how many of us also know a teacher or a counselor or somebody at our schools that they could sit down and listen to say, how can I be helpful? And maybe, just maybe, when you sit down and listen to them, you could also tell them, thank you. A third way that we can protect and cherish our children is to volunteer. Now, I promise that neither Susan Pauls or Wendy Wheeler came to me as I was writing my sermon. They did not force me to say these words, but I'm going to say this very clearly. You can volunteer today to make a difference in the life of a family or a child, because Family Promise comes into our building within the next few hours. For those of you that don't know what Family Promise is, it's an incredible program that protects and cherishes children, that brings families into the program to help to teach them and guide them in ways that are healthy and sustainable. And as they're figuring all that out, we give them a place to stay. In your Sunday school rooms, here in our gym, they eat. And so here, in a few minutes, as we finish up our worship service, you can go and set up those rooms as living rooms to be good hosts to our guests. Before you do, on the way out, you can sign up for a slot that is still open, Susan tells me, or something during this week. You can volunteer here in this place that you're comfortable with. You don't have to go and do any kind of extra special anything. Just sign up and show up. That's just one of many ways that you can volunteer to be an important part of a child's life. Family Promise is one. Head Start is another. Our school system, our communities in schools programs, these are organizations that can use volunteers. Now, some of us get scared off by the background checks or the paperwork that we have to fill out to do all of that, but in the long run, it is worth it. Worth it to make the difference in the life of a child. Some of you have met my friend Jason Poteet, a college friend who comes to visit a time or two a year. He's a counselor at an elementary school in southern Indiana. He happens to be here this weekend, and so I asked him as I was writing my sermon this week, so what would you say is an important way to protect and cherish our children? And he said, listen to them. So often, children just don't have an adult in their lives that will be that listening ear, that will sit down and listen to what their day was like, what's going on at home, what struggles and fears they have. And our schools and those that work with children in our community need those volunteers to simply come and be that listening ear. Or maybe you go and volunteer and you don't even see a single kid. But after 8 hours in the laminating room, as a volunteer, you have given the gift to that harried third grade teacher who is now able to be an important ear in the life of that child. Whatever your volunteering looks like, it is a blessing and it is important. Volunteer to be a part of a blessing to God's children. Finally, number 4. A fourth way to protect and cherish every child is to let them struggle. Now, I'll need to unpack that a little bit, but this is a good time for an important clarification. It may seem a little bit silly to talk about our children as voiceless when we think about how much advertisers on Madison Avenue target our children, when we think about the buying power and the spending power that young people have compared to previous eras, when we think about the voice that young people have compared to days gone by, it seems just a little ludicrous to say that they don't have a voice. However, there is a difference between giving children what they need and giving children what they have been taught to parrot back that they want. Advocating for children does not mean spoiling them. My daughter and I are reading through the Harry Potter series together, and there's an interesting scene in the 5th book. It's in the living room of the Dursleys, who basically for their entire parenting lives have spent it spoiling their biological son, Dudley, and neglecting their adopted son, Harry. Dudley gets whatever he wants. He's given all the gifts that he could imagine, dozens of things on his birthday. Harry, however, is made to live in a closet and given nothing but Dudley's chores to do. And so there's this interesting scene when the wise wizard Dumbledore comes into their living room and refers to the spoiled son Dudley as neglected. Everybody kind of scratches their heads, wondering exactly how he has ever been neglected in his life, but perhaps you see his point. Not allowing our children to face the struggles of life. Protecting them from common everyday disappointments and losses. Hovering so close over them that they never learn true freedom or responsibility. These are forms of neglect. Cherishing our children does not mean spoiling them. If anything, it means the opposite. Now, I want to clarify that protecting children is not the same as making sure that they have everything their hearts desire. In fact, in the face of so many in our country and in our world who truly do not have enough, I believe that cherishing all children, every child, means that sometimes we need to deny some children what they have been told they think they want, so that others will be able to have what they truly need. Let me say that one again. Cherishing all children means that sometimes we need to deny some children who have been told they think they want, so that others will be able to have what they need to survive and flourish. What if those of our kids who are relatively comfortable, free of poverty, learned to volunteer at Family Promise? Learn to give some of their allowance to Head Start. Learn to pray for children their age who are stuck in the cycle of poverty. Cherishing all children means that we want them to grow up physically healthy without the ravages of poverty, without the realities of abuse, without the terror of incarceration, to grow up emotionally and mentally strong, to learn to face the difficulties of life in responsible and moral ways. It's not an easy problem to fix, but there are things that we can do. Steps that we can take to make it better. Levi was always one of those troubled kids. All throughout town, he was known as a problem child. His mom had died when he was young, and his father had a lot of mental and emotional challenges that left him really incapacitated for days, sometimes weeks at a time. And during these times, of course, Levi had to fend for himself, and he would sometimes wander the streets trying to figure out what he was going to eat that day. And of course, he got in trouble plenty for stealing, for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He knew well the hand of an adult upon his shoulder to whirl him around and kick him out of a store or give him a lecture or a talking to. On this day, Levi's father had some difficulties, and so Levi was on his own again. And the moment that he reached out to grab a piece of fruit at the open air market, he felt that hand on his shoulder once more. But as he turned around, it was not a hand to yell or punish or scream, but instead it was a face of love, a face of forgiveness, a face of acceptance. And that man then picked up Levi and put him on top of a box and began to speak loudly so that all could hear. Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like this child, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Believe it. You must be like this child to be the greatest in the kingdom. And whoever welcomes a child like this in my name welcomes me. He picked Levi up again and put him on the ground, gave him some food to eat, and sent him home. And as Levi ran home to tell his dad what had happened, he looked back and deep down yearned that every adult would be like that man. Let us pray. God, may we be like that man. May the life of Christ bubble up inside of us, that when we see a child, when we see any of your children, young or old, tall or short, skinny or not, we see one loved by you. Just like Jesus did. Just like Jesus taught us to do. Thank you for your children. Thank you for your love. Amen.